Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me today here on Point of View. It is our weekend edition. We have lots to cover. This has been a very busy week. Of course, we'll talk about that shooting in Oregon in just a little bit. Planned Parenthood, and that has certainly been in the news because of some of the hearings that took place in Congress, and we'll start maybe talking about that. What is happening in Syria with Russia, that is certainly another topic that we will address in terms of foreign policy. And a little bit later in the program, Representative Louie Gohmert will join us as we'll talk about the race for Speaker of the House. He ran in the past and knows some of the individuals running now, so it'll be a great opportunity to hear from him as well. Penna Dexter, we've got lots to cover today, as always.
We do, and here's another story. It's kind of like the weirdest story of the week. I saw it on Drudge this morning. It's Paris Fashion Week, and so, of course, they've got everybody walking the runways with the latest fashions. And one of the very interesting thing that the models are wearing is themselves, each other. They're wearing each other. So I looked at all the pictures, and people can see it if they want to. They're kind of like hanging from each other with their legs over shoulders and different poses and things. I'm not sure what they're supposed to be communicating here. It's very strange. Something about, though, the strength and power of womanhood.
Yes. Well,
whatever.
Well, again, we have all sorts of interesting stories to cover there, and we'll certainly get into those. And, of course, as we open up the phones, give you a chance to join our conversation. Weekend edition, and certainly if you'd like to join us at any point, 1-800-351-1212. I know we'll have a lot to say about the shooting in Oregon, but let me start with Planned Parenthood. That happened a couple of days ago. David Harsanyi actually said that if for some reason you needed additional evidence that the Republican Party is deeply incompetent, unprepared, uncoordinated, and inexcusably lazy, then try watching the Cecile Richards appearance in front of Congress earlier this week. He says, now I get the fact that these kinds of hearings are normally a waste of time, but in this instance, the GOP had some good reasons to project competence. This is, of course, a big issue, but they did not. And even yesterday, off camera and off air, we were talking with John Stonestreet, and he, at the Colson Center for Christian Worldview, worked with other groups to provide some very, I think, pointed questions to ask Cecile Richards. And then they called back later and said, no, we'll just go with ours. And I think preparation would have been a lot better, because when you spend a fair amount of time asking Cecile Richards how much she makes, what her salary is, or whether or not some of the facts are right when you're, as he says, arguing about decimal points, Planned Parenthood is winning.
I hope this isn't the only hearing. This hearing perhaps should have even been postponed, because apparently those videos, I think there are 10 of them out or more, and they are what rocked the country. They are the reason for the hearings. The videos could not be shown because of they're tied up somehow. I don't know what it is. The reason that they could not be shown, and they wouldn't have needed anything else but to show the videos or show clips of the videos, maybe with some explanation. Here's why we need to defund Planned Parenthood. Instead, they went to the dollar figures. How much various Planned Parenthood members make, how much Cecile Richards make. The big question was, does Planned Parenthood need federal subsidies? In my mind, that kind of questioning almost acknowledges that Planned Parenthood is necessary.
Yeah.
But do they need federal subsidies? That was a type of question they were asking. Whereas the opportunity that the right had, that conservatives and pro-lifers had here, was to show the criminal.
Yes.
We really believe criminal activity that's taking place there in the selling of human body parts. And I think that highlights the whole abortion side of Planned Parenthood, how many abortions they do and how they alter the procedure to get the best, either an intact fetus or an intact body part to the detriment of the woman getting the abortion. That was not what this was about. And it's a missed opportunity.
Yes, you could have had diagrams even if you couldn't have videos, and you could have had descriptions even if you didn't have videos. So I understand that. And on the other side, you got to recognize that this plays too easily into the war on women. I mean, we heard some people saying this misogyny is taking place. And, again, there's a few times where you have to sort of roll your eyes when people were getting all upset about this because they were saying, well, I cannot think of any time in which we've ever questioned the salary of CEOs. Oh, yeah? Do you remember when those CEOs came in just a couple of months ago, and they aren't even on taxpayer funding, and they were being grilled far worse? But nevertheless, you can get away with some of that if indeed the argument is it's a war on women, and this is an organization that provides pap smears and mammograms, which they don't. And it seems to me that taking on some of those myths would be helpful, since a lot of Americans simply don't know what Planned Parenthood does and don't even realize how much Planned Parenthood gets of our tax dollars for what they do.
Somehow, I think Planned Parenthood will be able to turn this on the right and use it, because they're able to say, as you said, they're able to play up the whole mantra of the war on women, the war on Cecile Richards, poor woman, for making such a nice salary. Simply because she's a woman, they're attacking her. Things like that. They'll be able to use that type of thing. And what they also say, of course, is Planned Parenthood exists not only for all these health clinic services, but also to give women a choice. And this government is coming in and trying to deny women a choice by removing the funding from Planned Parenthood. This is their message. They stay on it. She stayed on it during the hearings.
Yes.
And, we could have undercut that message with a lot more content from the videos.
I would think so. One other one I just thought I'd put on the table, and that is Representative Ron DeSantis the other day, when he was in the hearing, actually asked Mrs. Richards, if a child survives an abortion attempt, should it be given nourishment and medical care? Of course, we know, that the president would disagree with that. And her response was, I've never heard of such a circumstance happening. Now, just recognize, for those people that don't pay attention to the hearings, and that's most of us, 2 weeks earlier had Gianna Jessen. And years ago, I met her just as a young teenager, and she is one of these individuals that actually survived an abortion. And she's even pointed out that she was fortunate at that time that the abortionist was not at work when that took place, because otherwise, she said, my life would have ended with strangulation, suffocation, or leaving me there to die. But a nurse called her ambulance. Of course, I've met her before and shared a platform with her. She is dealing with cerebral palsy, but she's a good example of the fact that, no, that does indeed happen sometimes.
Yeah, and we've passed states have passed laws across the country with regard to that. So that was a very disingenuous statement. She's probably fought those laws.
Yes. Well, again, those are just a few of the issues from Planned Parenthood. If you'd like to join us on that topic, certainly we will. I'll give you that chance. But when we come back, we'll talk about what happened in Oregon, the shooting there. And I want to try to put just a couple of facts and figures on the table, some of those that you don't hear in the mainstream media, because that's what we talk about here on Point of View. Everything is open for debate and discussion, but sometimes some of those facts that are really important never get covered. So if you would like to join the conversation today, 1-800-351-1212. If you have thoughts about Planned Parenthood, whether it should be defunded, we'd love to hear from you. And Penna, one of the things I've noticed is that the surveys that have been done right now find that about half of Americans think we should defund Planned Parenthood, half think we should not. Well, it's easy to see why half think we should not, because those are probably the same people that have never seen 1 minute of the videos.
Yeah.
Right? If you
so
watch
again,
mainstream
a missed
media.
Opportunity.
Yes.
Big missed opportunity.
Missed opportunities, even if it could not be shown in the hearings, certainly could be described. There are diagrams that could have been put together, and there have been some really pointed questions that I think would have been a lot more helpful. But that's where we find ourselves in that particular debate. Also maybe brings us back to something we'll talk about in the second hour, and that is the race for the Speaker of the House. Who's going to kind of lead the Republicans in the future? We will talk with you and continue our conversation right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
If you've ever watched the debates, you know that some very important questions never get asked. And if the moderator asks a challenging question, the candidate usually changes the subject. In a recent column, Kevin Williamson writes about the question no candidate will answer. In the next debate, he would like the moderator to say this: given the small number of federal expenditures, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, National Security, and interest on the debt typically constitute about 80% of all federal spending, and given that we are not going to cut non-defense discretionary spending to zero, there is no mathematically plausible way to balance the budget without, number one, cutting spending on Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, and or National Security, and number two, raising taxes. So what's it going to be? Spending cuts in popular programs, higher taxes, or deficits forever? And before you give the answer, I'd like you to know that standing behind each of you is a man with a taser and instructions to use it on the first person whose answer relies on the growth fairy, looking at you, Jeb, or the waste, fraud, and abuse fairy. Go. You don't have to have much political knowledge to understand why few ask this question, and no candidate wants to give a clear answer to that question. Many Americans aren't willing to acknowledge we have a problem, and even more would react negatively to an honest attempt to solve this growing crisis. To be fair, a few candidates have talked about a policy of means testing Social Security. That's not enough to balance the books, but at least it's a serious proposal. But that may be all you hear this election season, because we, the voters, have made it clear we will punish anyone who really tries to answer this major economic challenge. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Prayer is a powerful weapon. From Provident Films and Affirm Films comes War Room, now playing rated PG. More information at warroomthemovie.com.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Thank you for joining our conversations. Weekend edition, 1-800-351-1212. Only put one topic on the table, but we have a guest caller here that would like to put on another one. Andrea in North Carolina, WLGP. Let's talk about, I think you want to talk about Kim Davis and the Pope.
Yeah, I really wanted to hear what Penna had to say about that. It really bothers me, Kerby. The media slant to that. I know she's doing the right thing. Absolutely. I know her attorneys are taking care of business, and that it's a precedent case like a lot of the other ones on the table, but as a Christian. But it's like I just wanted to hear what Penna had to say about the way it's being handled politically. Thank you very much.
Hi, Andrea. Thank you for asking. And one of the things, I don't know if you read this, because it certainly wasn't in much media, but she actually got an audience with the Pope, and that's probably why you're calling. Mm-hmm. That was not reported while the Pope was here, and I understand, her attorneys didn't make a big deal out of it or anything, because they did not, they just really thought that might cause more problems than it would solve. But the fact has now been released, and I think the media, it would be a great story. I think it would be an interesting story for the American people to understand that the Pope met with this woman who was putting her career and, everything on the line, who went to jail for her faith. And you don't see that. I mean, you saw her on the front page being made fun of during her jailing. But now, do you see her? Now that she's a hero and received all sorts of awards, you don't see that. And so I think that's a big shame. But it's not surprising, Andrea, that the media is not covering this. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, and the other thing I wanted to add just before I get back to Andrea is that you have the MSNBC just furious about this. There was a piece in the Washington Post
about the Pope meeting her?
Yeah, about meeting. I can't believe that he met with her. And yet I haven't seen the same kind of outrage about the Pope meeting with, shaking hands, and spending a fair amount of time with Fidel Castro, who has killed, hundreds of people at least. But Andrea,
they're almost absurd now.
Yeah, it's just it's become so inverted. But Andrea, any follow-up comments?
I just want to hear what your thoughts were, and your feelings are the same as mine.
Very good.
Thank you so much for hearing me.
Just for the benefit of some of our listeners, when they announced that he met with Kim Davis, a clerk from Rowan County, he said, conscientious objection must enter into every judicial structure because it is right. I can't have in mind all cases that can exist about conscientious objection, but yes, I can say that conscientious objection is a right that is part of every human right. In other words, he was defending her for standing up for those issues. He also met, of course, with the Little Sisters of the Poor. Mm-hmm. So there are a couple of examples of where the Pope didn't exactly follow what the liberal line wanted. I mean, they were thrilled about the fact that he talked about climate change and about income redistribution or income inequality, at least I'll be more fair about that. But when he talks about abortion or traditional marriage, or he meets with the Little Sisters of the Poor, or he meets with Kim Davis, boy, they all just go crazy about that.
Yeah, I might mention, I put this in my commentary this week, but they use the Pope as a prop for redistributive economic programs. They use him that way. They use the visit that way. And yet there was this defund fight last week about Planned Parenthood, and perhaps a government quote unquote shutdown might have taken place if the Republicans had any backbone, but it didn't. So certain members of Congress used the Pope to come against this effort to defund Planned Parenthood, which I thought was sort of funny. They were saying, you're hurting the poor. This is a humanitarian issue. And you start to wonder, well, what about abortion? Isn't that a humanitarian issue? And the Pope stands against, hurting an unborn child or killing one. So they were being very disingenuous in that sense. And it just shows they loved one side of the Pope. They did not like the moral side of the Pope, the Catholic morality. They didn't really cover that as well as it could have been.
Well, again, if you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. Well, we're talking about Planned Parenthood before we get to that shooting there in Oregon. Let's take another phone call. We'll go to North Carolina once again. And Alan, thank you for joining us today.
Yes, I just tuned in and I heard talking about Planned Parenthood, and that, this gets under my skin because I don't agree with, funding Planned Parenthood with the abortion involved because of it, just like you mentioned about the humanitarian aspect of it. But what really gets me is now we have Obamacare. And with Obamacare, everybody's supposed to have insurance. And so if everybody has insurance, and why can't women still have the right to choose and it be paid for by the insurance if it's so important for the government to agree with that? And with that aspect being in mind, there's nothing wrong with the, supporting women and giving them, like was mentioned earlier, about pap smears and mammograms and so forth, and doing that part of it. But why does the government need to fund them when they have insurance now to be paying for all this for women because everybody's required to have Obamacare? That's what I wanted to put on the table.
Well, this is where groups like Planned Parenthood actually benefit doubly, because not only do they get government funding for their programs, they also get dollars going in per visit and per procedure. And so they get, from all of our government programs, Planned Parenthood takes that, like Medicaid and Medicare and things like that. And so they benefit from both of those. Obamacare, Planned Parenthood they were in the writing of Obamacare. They were part of that. Mm-hmm. So it definitely benefits them. And that's why it's not that easy for the Republicans to get it defunded. It's not just a simple matter. It's very much entrenched in all of Obamacare and all of our medical programs for the poor.
And Alan, you asked a question that Ben Carson asked a while back, because somebody's asking, well, why shouldn't we fund Planned Parenthood? Why shouldn't we fund these community health centers and all of that? And that's what he said. Well, I thought that's what Obamacare was for. So, I mean, you're asking a question that has surfaced in some of the discussions with at least one of the presidential candidates. So it's a good question, and it's another question that I think could have been part of that hearing. Why should we fund you when we already have all sorts of other ways in which we're meeting the health needs of women? And of course, these community health centers that are around the country, there's 7 times as many of those that do mammograms, do all the health, and don't do abortion. So why not take the money that has been going to a completely tarnished organization, Planned Parenthood, that may be even somewhat of a criminal enterprise, may actually have violated the law in a few cases, and give it to the community health centers out there, and thus actually treat women's needs in an effective way without the controversial issue of abortion and fetal tissue sales and harvesting.
You know, I hope that the funding issue does take hold, because Planned Parenthood, I think, brings in like $1 billion a year, and half of it comes from the government, or more than half of it. And so, you know, that is disturbing, and that's what the hearings are trying to bring out. And I hope that people get that message. It's one part of it. It's just not, sometimes it's not the most emotional part of it that pulls on heartstrings. So I hope that hearing, if it accomplishes anything, brings that message across. We need some more hearings, though, to bring out the criminality of this organization and what they are actually doing.
We're going to spend some time in the next segment or two looking at the issue of guns and gun violence and gun control. And one of the facts I wanted to at least put on the table now, and we'll come back and talk about it more, is that we've seen greater coverage of all of this, but have the actual numbers gone up? And the answer to that is no. It always seems as if public shootings have gone up and that public shootings are on the increase. But if you look at the FBI statistics, mass shootings, which are defined as 4 or more fatalities, they fluctuate from year to year, but they have not increased significantly. On the other hand, random mass shootings, which is where most people are thinking about when they ask the questions, those have increased, but they've increased a lot more in terms of the coverage. And if you compare that to the number of young people that gave their lives up just in the last week in, say, Chicago, and compare to the 9 killed in Oregon, you certainly have to put some of that together as well. So we're going to spend some time getting into that issue. And, of course, there are all sorts of suggestions. And even before some of the bodies have been taken to the morgue, the President stood in front of the American people and told us all that the solution there was gun control. So we'll spend some time talking about that issue, and certainly would love to get your comments. 1-800-351-1212. Penna Dexter with me, and of course we give you an opportunity to read a number of things, including my commentary that we posted, and now hers on funding Planned Parenthood is up there. By the way, those of you that listen online will be able to hear that in just a few minutes, because we play it during the not this break, but the coming break. And we'll get into some more of that if you would like to address that issue. But of course, we're also going to get into this issue of gun violence, gun control, and what can or should be done in the future if we want to protect students on college campuses and in other venues. So if you'd like to join the conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Visit the website. You'll find all sorts of opportunities for you to participate today. We have the viewpoint section. We have the take action section on the fight to defund Planned Parenthood, as well as all sorts of other resources. And if you haven't downloaded it, you can also get a Point of View app on your phone. That's a way you can follow us as well. Let's take a break. We'll come back with your phone calls, 1-800-351-1212, and some conversation about what happened in Oregon right after this.
This is an on-the-go world, and now wherever you go, Point of View goes with you. Visit the Apple or Google Play Store and download the free Point of View app. You can listen and watch the program live or play it again later. Get Kerby's Viewpoints commentary and click the Take Action link to make a difference in the world. You can also read articles, find a local radio station, and easily contact us with your comments or questions. Again, visit the Apple or Google Play Store today and get the app, the Point of View radio app. And one more thing, if you like it, click that button that says Donate Now and join the team. Point of View and the Point of View app, with you on the go.
At 17,000 feet on Mount Ararat in eastern Turkey.
We see it in every culture. The flood was a common story told, and there was an ark that saved humankind.
Lies a mystery that could change the way we look at the world.
Let's go find an ark.
Presented as a Fathom event, Finding Noah, an adventure of faith.
We knew we were on the brink of what could be the greatest archaeological discovery so far.
Witness the journey. Finding Noah. One night only, October 8th in theaters nationwide. FindingNoah.com.
Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again,
is Kerby Anderson.
If you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Weekend edition. Penna Dexter with me as well, and we've been talking about Planned Parenthood. We'll stay on that for another couple of minutes for these phone calls and then get into this issue of guns and gun control and what has happened in Oregon. Let's head out to Alabama first. Ken, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Kerby, for taking my call. There's a pretty good article out there today at the New American Magazine there at thenewamerican.com. The article's entitled, Whatever Happened to Obamacare Repeal? And it goes on to say that numerous Obamacare repeal bills were filed when the 114th Congress convened this past January. Some of the bills sought to rescue Obamacare by reforming it, while some would have repealed and replaced it. Of course, anyone familiar with politics on the Potomac knows that, quote, repeal and replace, unquote, usually means, quote, keep and rename. And I'm afraid I've heard many a Republican use that term, oh, we'll repeal it and replace it. And I'm always wondering what are they going to replace it with, which brings the question, and I'll just leave you with this. Under what authority does Congress fund Planned Parenthood? It seems like the 10th Amendment would take care of that, because I don't see the word doctor, nurse, hospital, prescription, or anything like that anywhere in the Constitution.
Boy, you sound like Ted Cruz or Louie Gohmert or a lot of other individuals, you know.
I think that's why John Boehner's no longer Speaker, because people are very upset that Obamacare, that promise to repeal, it just didn't get it. I mean, I know that the House voted to repeal it a lot of times, but there wasn't effective action to take place to even just get it back up there at the president's desk.
You know, there were a few Supreme Court justices that did raise that question, but you need 5 in order to win there. And, of course, who cares about the Constitution anymore? We have a president that doesn't seem to, and some members of Congress that don't seem to. A little bit later, when we have Louie Gohmert with us, we'll talk about if that would change with a different Speaker of the House, because some of those bills never made the light of day, and even those that did, of course, you knew that they would be bottled up in the Senate. And even if they did pass the House and the Senate, it again brings you back to the importance of who sits in the Oval Office. So a lot of issues there. Let's take another phone call.
Of course, we'll see what happens if a conservative it ends up being elected to the White House.
Yeah.
Then the Congress will actually be able to act, will they?
That's a good question, you know, because it's easy to act now and know that it's not going anywhere. But it's another thing to act and know that all of a sudden you really would have replaced, and then what you replace it with. There are some people, Ben Carson and others, that have some suggestions on what to replace it with, but it will be interesting to see how that plays out in this election. Let's go to South Carolina this time on the Good News Network. Collins, thank you for calling today.
Good evening. Good afternoon.
What would you like to add to the conversation?
Well, I had a question mainly. What percentage of women who had abortions are Republican? And I want to know whether any Republican women have ever had abortions.
And I think the answer to that is probably yes. I think it's a smaller percentage. The times I've looked at this, there is, you know, abortion is not uniform across the culture. That is, there are fewer abortions by people that are churchgoers than there are by people that are not churchgoers, women that are churchgoers and not churchgoers, and a variety of other things. I suspect there would probably be, I can't prove this because I haven't looked at the numbers, probably more individuals that identify themselves as Democrat who have abortions than women that identify themselves as Republicans. But where are you going with this?
Because, I mean, to me, I think the whole law came about because somebody saw a need for it. I think babies were aborted before the law was approved. Okay, the women's lives was at stake then, and I think the nation acted in a way to save women's lives then. So I think it was the emphasis on the woman's life why it came about. So
why abortion came about? Yeah,
that was the justification that, you know, this will save women's lives. And I think the argument which was put forth in 1973 was we don't want back alley abortions. We want to make it safe, legal, and rare, to borrow a phrase used later on by Bill Clinton. Well, it didn't exactly play itself out that way. I remember Joseph Sobran was on with Marlon Maddox years ago, and he said, you know, I was there when that decision came down, and I thought this is going to be something that is going to be a change in our culture, but it can't be a big change because most women are probably not going to get an abortion. There's going to be a lot of shame associated with it. And so maybe we could even maybe have as many as 100,000 abortions every year. And, of course, you're shaking your head, Penna, because you know that we've had like 1.5 million. And the argument was always...
Per year.
That the argument was always that this would not be that big a deal. It would just be a way to save women and save their lives, or in some cases give women an option if they had an unplanned pregnancy where there was a genetic defect. Those are the kind of arguments were used. I don't think even the proponents recognize that you'd have 1.5 million abortions every single year. I don't think they would have ever even imagined that you would have had almost 60 million abortions since the Roe versus Wade decision.
Also, I think some of the statistics, and I don't have them in front of me with regard to certain communities in the country. I mean, we could talk parties, but I think it's more instructive to talk communities, minorities. And black babies are aborted to a much greater extent than white babies, for instance.
Sure.
It's almost a genocide to some degree. And so, yes, it was seen as a solution to a problem. I do see that. But it's brought up so many more problems. Not only, yes, it was also presented as to help the health of the mother, but it doesn't necessarily. Sometimes it makes women infertile. Sometimes it causes other problems. Certainly it causes psychological problems, spiritual problems of regret. People who did not, they're confronted with this, and they really didn't get enough people on all sides to talk them through it so that they might have come to another decision about that baby. And, I saw a video this week. You may have sent this to me, Kerby, and it was a picture of a baby on its tummy with the head up and just with this smile and sweet little noises coming out, cooing and things like that. And, talking about how women need to have this right. This is for women. And then you see this picture of this darling baby and you're thinking, well, what about the baby? And number two, those babies usually bring a lot of joy to women's lives, even if they're a single mom, even if they're, perhaps have some sort of a birth defect or disability. They do. It's just that you have to get through the rough time. And what we need to do as a country is to support women, not talk them into killing their own child. Well,
again, as we said yesterday, you have more pregnancy care centers in the country than you have abortion centers. So in some respects, we have answered that question of what about a woman that has an unplanned pregnancy? Maybe she wants to give it up, or maybe whatever. We give them options other than abortion. So that is certainly a topic that we'll continue to take questions on, but let's, if we can, move to Oregon for just a few minutes, and that is, of course, the shooting. This is an individual that obviously was very deranged and asked people if they were Christians before he decided to shoot them. So again, this reminds us a little bit of Columbine. But the question a lot of people have had is there any way to reduce the number of these public shootings? And one research study, it's been a long-term, what's called a longitudinal study. It was peer-reviewed. It's appeared in academic journals, done by Professor John Lott, used to be at Yale, now has been at other institutions as well. He's been a guest on this program, and William Landis found, first of all, a common theme in all these mass shootings. They almost always occur in gun-free zones, like a school, post office, shopping mall, whatever. They examined all the policies that have been put forward. Yesterday, the president was talking about all sorts of policies we could implement to actually reduce those. And they looked at each one of those, the impact of waiting periods, background checks, increased penalties for crime with the gun, and even the death penalty. They found that none of these policies had any effect on the incidents or the casualties from mass shootings, with one exception. The one public policy that did make a difference, concealed carry license. And again, if you are deranged or even in your right mind and you intend harm, if you go into an institution where you know that person may be armed, it is going to be very different in your mindset than if you go into an institution which you know is a gun-free zone. You don't see mass shootings in a gun store. You don't see mass shootings at a gun range. But you do see mass shootings at gun-free zones, and that's, of course, exactly what took place yesterday there in Oregon.
Of course, the shooter shows signs, as we look into his background, as much as we have been in the last few hours, that he was crazy and to some degree. And so he could have gone in there even knowing that there might be someone in there with a gun, not cared about his life, things like that. But usually you limit the number of casualties if you have someone in there that's got a weapon. And it was very interesting to me today to hear, of course, this is led by President Obama's immediate comments for gun control, but certain colleges like the University of Texas, where, we have pretty good conceal and carry opportunities here and laws, but a bunch of professors there are demanding now no guns in the classroom. And, this is at the University of Texas. And to me, it's so absurd to say that because the person that walks in shooting is not going to be the person that got, they can get their guns or not get their guns legally or illegally. But if some people in the classroom, if no one in there has a gun, you can't do anything about that person. If someone in there does have a gun, if a student happens to be carrying, your problem is ended fairly quickly. 160
professors so far at the University of Texas want a gun-free UT is what they're asking for.
That's absurd.
Gun-free UT.
No way.
And we just saw what happens when you don't. You think of that one man that had served in the Army and tried to stop this and was shot 5 times. Imagine if he had a weapon.
Yeah.
How different that
Things
would have
been different.
Let's take your phone calls, though. 1-800-351-1212. We'll be back right after this.
America has the chance to stop funding one of the major perpetrators of an ongoing humanitarian crisis. But we're kicking the can down the road to December. The disturbing videos released by the Center for Medical Progress, which highlight Planned Parenthood's abortion activity and their side business selling baby parts, should have made went ahead and passed a bill to fund the government, including money for Planned Parenthood. There's this false choice that's dangled before politicians. Fund Planned Parenthood or be blamed for a so-called government shutdown. The president, of course, would veto any defunding measure. He went so far as to announce in fundraising emails that he'd rather let food stamp recipients go without than allow Planned Parenthood to be defunded. 45 million Americans participate in the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP. The SNAP program didn't miss a beat during the 16-day partial government shutdown of October 2013. But apparently there are currently no contingency funds for this. One pro-abortion congressman, Jeff Merkley of Oregon, disingenuously applied the Pope's humanitarian concerns to the situation, saying, "On a week when the Pope is making an historic visit to Washington to remind us all of our moral obligation to care for the poorest and most vulnerable among us, it is shameful that we are even contemplating a politically driven shutdown that would take food off the tables of millions of children, seniors, and disabled Americans." We must ask, who is more vulnerable than an unborn child? And Representative Merkley completely leaves out the fact that the Pope is pro-life. At the United Nations, Pope Francis condemned, quote, the marketing of human organs and tissues. Wonder if he saw the videos. This stunning loyalty to Planned Parenthood is partially explained by the organization's endorsement of President Obama and their tremendous help electing him. Plus, in 2010, Planned Parenthood Federation of America, along with a California affiliate, spent more than $700,000 on federal lobbying efforts. Planned Parenthood and its advocates in Congress insist that withholding federal funds means that poor women would be denied contraception, mammograms, and other basic health services. But Congress already spends billions every year through Medicaid, Medicare, and Title X for all kinds of medical services. As for mammograms, a new study proves Planned Parenthood doesn't do them. Defunding the left is just as crucial to the country's future as cutting spending. Planned Parenthood is their sacred cow because it helps facilitate their vision of amoral sexuality. Congress must defund Planned Parenthood. We now know Planned Parenthood sells body parts, the products of the abortions they perform, and that they risk harming women by altering procedures to get intact parts. To show our disgust, defunding Planned Parenthood is the very least we can do. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Weekend edition, if you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. We've talked about Planned Parenthood, and those of you listening online or even on hold just heard the commentary that we play for Penna Dexter right now. If you would like to see her commentary funding Planned Parenthood, go to our website, pointofview.net. Or better yet, what you can do is sign up, because each day we send my commentary Monday through Friday. Then we take the commentary that Penna has written, and it comes out on Saturday. So 6 days a week you can read one of our commentaries, and I would encourage you. Or listen.
We send the audio out, too.
You can do that, too. And it always sounds really good. And so that's a great opportunity for you to take some of that and maybe post it on your Facebook page or send it to someone else, as we were talking about Planned Parenthood. But now we've moved into the question of guns and gun control. So let's head out to New Hampshire first, WSEW. Bill, thank you for calling today.
Thank you for taking my call.
Well, I know you have a lot to say, so I'll give you the opportunity to express your opinion.
Well, being up in this stretch of the woods in New Hampshire and Maine, hearing the president come on right away and just saying gun control, I do know we have a lot of laws out there that are not presently enforced, and it was a gun-free zone, which we've been told. If, here's a big, that's a big word, if somebody would have had a concealed pistol, I'm sure a lot less children would have been hurt. I've been into several large grocery chain stores and in northern Maine, and there's usually between 2 to 10 people with pistols on their hips wearing orange vests, and I've never seen any of those type of stores where crazed people come in and shooting and robbing.
So those people work for the store, protecting the store?
Oh, no, they're going
hunters,
up
probably.
and down
They're just
the
people.
aisle people shopping with pistols. And
Okay.
I don't feel threatened in any way, shape, or form, knowing that these guys are wearing the blaze orange and pistols on their hips and on their shoulders, and that doesn't bother me. I know that they've done it legally, and obviously if they've done it legally, they're not I'm not saying anything mentally wrong, but if the people are psychological issues are probably, I would say 99% not going to get a pistol anyway because they're either medicated or they've had other charges that's going to keep them from getting pistols. And I just think we don't need new laws. The existing laws, I'm sure, cover a lot, but we can't enforce what we already have. And it's just ironic. I'm sure more kids are killed by alcohol poisoning and DWIs, but we're not jumping on putting Budweiser out of business.
And again, the point I make is that and this is a tragic one, so you got to be real careful how you say this. The loss of 9 lives in Oregon, but there will be more lives lost probably this weekend in Chicago. And again, and you can go to places where you have other gun-free zones where this takes place. You have other places where it is very difficult to get a firearm, and yet killings and shootings take place. And so sometimes the media and even this president focus on one particular issue because the goal there is to move ahead with gun registration. And can I also throw in the word gun confiscation? Yeah. Yesterday, the president talked about we should have laws like Australia. If you don't know, Australia did have what was called a buyback program, and it was implemented after the horrific shooting that took place down there in Australia in the late 1990s. But what I think the mainstream press rarely covers is it wasn't an optional buyback, it was a mandatory buyback. So when the president says we need to have laws like Australia, that means we need to take guns away from individuals listening to this program. He puts it in a nice way. But if you're going to talk about Australia, that's a very different kind of gun control than I think what most people have in their minds when they hear about it.
I agree.
Kerby, since you do have family in Oregon, I know, what are the laws there with regard to guns?
It's a little more restrictive there. I mean, the states which generally have more open laws tend to be Midwest and Southern, but as soon as I say that, Bill lives in a state of New Hampshire. That's, 6 hours there, for example, in Epping, New Hampshire. Vermont has always rated in kind of the top 10 in terms of having more freedom to have a firearm. The countries, or the states, I should say, that are at the bottom of the list are things like California, New York, and Oregon fits into that category. So it's oftentimes even more ironic that when it's in these states where it is relatively difficult, and I'm using that term relatively difficult, to get a firearm compared to other states, sometimes when those shootings take place, that doesn't seem to make any difference. And if you talk about the shootings, say, in Washington, D.C., there's probably the best example there. I mean, we for some time have been trying to completely remove guns from Washington, D.C. That led to a Supreme Court case. And by the 1980s, Washington, D.C. came to be known as kind of the murder capital of the world. And it really wasn't until 2008 when the Supreme Court reversed that with a case that, by the way, Kelly Shackelford was involved with, at least in part, that changed some of that direction. So something to think about. And if you'd like to join the conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Just before we take a break, let's head out to Missouri. Kenny, I think you would like to add something to the conversation.
Yeah, sure. First of all, I really appreciate your show. Actually, our church contributes to the local radio station to keep it on the air.
Thank you.
My wife and I were sitting around talking, and of course, I tend to lean as a male probably a little towards the Old Testament, like Joshua or such, but rather than that, she brought up a good point that, it's not really a cultural problem with the shootings or a gun law problem as much as it is a spiritual problem. And she brought a good point up. She said, if you could get Christ in the hearts of more people, that's less people you have to worry about doing something as insane as slaughtering innocent people. I think we've mostly dropped our guard, not on gun laws or who has them or where they are, but as much as we've neglected sharing Christ and trying to get him more prolific in the culture itself.
Well said. If I can borrow an illustration that's been used before by others, but I'll change it a little bit. If you're in maybe a dangerous part of town and you're walking down the street and you hear people behind you and your heart begins to pump a little bit and you turn around and you see that they're carrying Bibles and they've just come from a Bible study, you're going to feel very different about who's behind you than if you turned around and see some gangbangers, right? And so it, I think, illustrates that even those Christian kids could be having a concealed carry license and could even have a gun, but it's who has their hands on that gun and ultimately what's in their heart that makes a difference.
This shooter exhibited a great hostility toward religion. He was asking every one of his victims, if they were a Christian, and if they were, they got shot in the head. And he would say something like, "You're going to see your God right away." Things like that. So that hostility toward religion just reminds me of something that we talk about especially Friday here on Point of View, and that is there's increasing government hostility toward religion in many different ways. I mean, we've seen it through Obamacare, them going after the rights of Christians to operate their life according to their religion, now marriage and things like that. And so we have a government hostility toward religion, and then we have a crazy person, but they're not all that crazy in their view of hostility toward religion because our government is also hostile. So as our caller's wife mentioned, it would be nice if we had more Christians. It would also be nice if we had less government hostility toward religion in the culture.
I think that's true, and I don't want to push that too far because if crazy people do crazy things, and people with bad attitudes have, bad attitudes that play out. But at the same time, I think it does give an opportunity for individuals that hate religion, hate organized religion, hate Christians, a little bit of a platform that didn't exist before. I think that is a really good point. We have a whole bank of phone calls, and if you will stay with us, we will take a break, and then you'll be first up as we come back. We've talked about Planned Parenthood, talked about shooting in Oregon. We will get into maybe some things happening in Russia, and then later we're going to be talking with Louie Gohmert about the speaker's race. There's a lot more to cover, but we need to take a break, so we'll see you on the other side of this right after these messages.
This is an on-the-go world, and now wherever you go, Point of View goes with you. Visit the Apple or Google Play Store and download the free Point of View app. You can listen and watch the program live or play it again later. Get Kerby's Viewpoints commentary and click the Take Action link to make a difference in the world. You can also read articles, find a local radio station, and easily contact us with your comments or questions. Again, visit the Apple or Google Play Store today and get the app, the Point of View radio app. And one more thing, if you like it, click that button that says Donate Now and join the team. Point of View and the Point of View app, with you on the go.
At 17,000 feet on Mount Ararat in eastern Turkey.
We see it in every culture. The flood was a common story told, and there was an ark that saved humankind.
Lies a mystery that could change the way we look at the world.
Let's go find an ark.
Presented as a Fathom event, Finding Noah, an adventure of faith.
We knew we were on the brink of what could be the greatest archaeological discovery so far.
Witness the journey. Finding Noah. One night only, October 8th in theaters nationwide. FindingNoah.com.
Point of View will continue after this.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kerby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. Each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View.
And now, Kerby Anderson.
Second hour, if you'd like to join our conversation today, Penna Dexter with me. It is our weekend edition, and certainly we have been talking about a number of things. Planned Parenthood has been one, and a little bit about Kim Davis as well, but then most of our time now has been on the shooting in Oregon, the questions about guns and gun control. If we have time this hour, we'll spend some time talking about what is happening in Russia and Syria, and of course we'll also be joined by Representative Louie Gohmert as we talk about the race for the Speaker of the House. Those are just a few issues we put on the table. There are probably others we could, but at the moment, let's take some of those phone calls related to what has happened in Oregon, and we'll go to New Hampshire and talk to Robert. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, Kerby. Thanks for taking my call. Kerby, let me say at the outset, I haven't been drinking. I lost my dentures. I called in a couple of weeks ago, and I listened to myself. I sound like a drunk. My dentures are missing, and I slur because I cannot articulate my words.
You're doing fine.
Oh.
Sounds good to me. You sound better than I do some days, so go for it.
Oh, okay, great. Kerby, I wanted to mention, and I heard Penna mention it just before the break, and I thought it was going to be the first, but according to one of the witnesses in the shooting, he lined up the victims on the wall, and then he asked them their religions, and if they said they were Christian, he would shoot them in the face, and if they said they weren't or didn't respond, he'd shoot them in the leg. So there's clearly, an agenda there for the Christian issue for some reason. Now, I'm not trying to start a riot, but, if it had been Muslims that he were identifying or blacks or a racist view, I think there'd be a lot more that was in the news today. That was one comment I wanted to make. And the other one, and then I'll let you go, is I'm truly a little bit ambivalent about Kim Davis's visit with the Pope. The term Christian, as you well know, is a term that was taken by the Protestants or those who, from the Reformation, were identified as Christians. And Catholics were Catholics. I was a Catholic for about 50 years before I was born again, now 18 years. But I've read a lot about this Pope and his agenda, and there's a great intention to try to bring all of us together, and we're clearly far and away different than the Roman Catholics in doctrine and in belief. And, just consider the obelisk that's in St. Peter's Square. That in and of itself is a pagan symbol. It's a pagan symbol, and it is in, the proximity of St. Peter's Basilica. That's just one small thing that shows, a variation. The admiration to Mary, who was a creature.
Yeah. Again, I think at this point, I don't want to get into Catholic theology. We can do that another day.
But let me ask Robert one thing. Did you hear, Robert, because I read this, that she was given a rosary or something by the Pope, and then she handed it off to her parents who are Catholic.
Right. I didn't know that,
keep it.
but I saw the two rosary beads. One was light and the other one was dark. Right. But it looked like she had just met with divinity, in the pictures that I saw of her, after her visit with the Pope.
I'm sure she's honored, and he did encourage her in her stance, which I think was very good of him to do. He said he'd pray for her, but he asked her to pray for him.
Yeah.
Which was pretty cool, I thought, too.
Well, again, that issue of conscientious objection was another topic. But again, the point we were bringing up is how controversial it was to the so-called left and individuals that made such a big issue about that. And on the other hand, not hardly a word of criticism meeting with Fidel Castro. So again, that just shows you the inverted nature of all of that. Well, I appreciate your call, but I want to move on to some others and give you a chance to join the conversation today. Let's go to Georgia this time. Duke, you have the floor. What would you like to add to the conversation?
Well, this was going back to the conversation on the shooting, and there's obviously these are in the news almost constantly now, but the one thing that has always bugged me is you never really hear the pro-gun control people bringing up the fact that these shooters are not as crazy or as insane as we'd like them to believe. They are clearly capable of a complicated, logical plan. It seems that they target specifically those areas that are labeled as gun-free zones, or those areas. Basically, essentially, they locate a place they can commit these atrocities in areas where it is almost impossible for a law-abiding citizen to be equipped to shoot back or to stop them or to prevent them in any fashion.
Sure.
And
let me make your case for you, and I'll let you respond. John Lott, I mentioned just a few minutes ago, used to be a professor at Yale, then at Johns Hopkins, other places. He pointed out, let's just look at one of those. Remember the shooting in Colorado at the movie theater? And he pointed out that the individual, and I just never mentioned the names of these shooters. I'm not going to give them any press whatsoever, but that shooter actually drove past 2 or 3 other movie theaters until he could get to one that he was sure actually was a gun-free zone, because that particular mall where the movie theater is located has signs posted. Now, you could say that was just hypothetical. That's, trying to read too much in there. But as I mentioned before, in this longitudinal study developed by John Lott and William Landis, they pointed out that when you look at the common theme in these shootings, they always take place in gun-free zones: schools, post offices, shopping malls, or in that case, a movie theater. So I think you can actually, by looking at the actions that individuals take, see that they are actually using, if you will, I'm using this in quotes, a rational calculus to figure out where they can do the greatest amount of harm and where it's least likely that somebody will shoot back at them.
Precisely, which, it suggests to me that we keep saying, oh, these people are insane. They're not insane. They should not be allowed to touch that as a defense. The only thing that labeling them insane is doing is saying, well, that reduces their chance of being executed. This will encourage other people to come and commit these similar crimes, and we can use these crimes to advance our agenda. But we never seem to point to the fact that gun control in these areas is what's making these crimes possible in the first place.
Good point. Appreciate your phone call.
Good point.
The best study I've ever seen came from Mother Jones. So I want to be fair for a minute. Let me give you a Mother Jones argument. And Mother Jones magazine actually claimed, quote, not a single case was the killing stopped by a civilian using a gun. And so they have actually looked at these studies talking about concealed carry laws. Okay, well, that's what they say, but I also saw what John Lott has found, and that is that when they looked at all the various things that could have had an impact on these mass shootings, they found that background checks, waiting periods, increased penalties for crime, death penalty, none of those worked except concealed carry. So how do we resolve that? If you go back and look at this, the magazine reached its conclusion by only looking at public shootings where 4 or more people were killed. Okay, so that's considered a mass shooting, but the point was that they never looked at those cases where somebody with a handgun prevented it from happening in the first place. You see the problem? Mm-hmm. Some of these shootings that might have taken place were stopped because somebody pulled a weapon out and they never started firing. And so that's the point. And so sometimes when you see some of this research, you just need to dig a little bit. So that's free of charge, but that's the other way of looking at some of those facts and figures. We'll take some more phone calls right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
If you've ever watched the debates, you know that some very important questions never get asked. And if the moderator asks a challenging question, the candidate usually changes the subject. In a recent column, Kevin Williamson writes about the question no candidate will answer. In the next debate, he would like the moderator to say this: given the small number of federal expenditures, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, National Security, and interest on the debt typically constitute about 80% of all federal spending, and given that we are not going to cut non-defense discretionary spending to zero, there is no mathematically plausible way to balance the budget without, number one, cutting spending on Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, and or National Security, and number two, raising taxes. So what's it going to be? Spending cuts in popular programs, higher taxes, or deficits forever? And before you give the answer, I'd like you to know that standing behind each of you is a man with a taser and instructions to use it on the first person whose answer relies on the growth fairy, looking at you, Jeb, or the waste, fraud, and abuse fairy. Go. You don't have to have much political knowledge to understand why few ask this question, and no candidate wants to give a clear answer to that question. Many Americans aren't willing to acknowledge we have a problem, and even more would react negatively to an honest attempt to solve this growing crisis. To be fair, a few candidates have talked about a policy of means testing Social Security. That's not enough to balance the books, but at least it's a serious proposal. But that may be all you hear this election season, because we, the voters, have made it clear we will punish anyone who really tries to answer this major economic challenge. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Prayer is a powerful weapon. From Provident Films and Affirm Films comes War Room, now playing rated PG. More information at warroomthemovie.com.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Penna Dexter with me. It is our weekend edition. We'll continue taking some phone calls and then move on to some other topics. Since we've been focusing on guns and gun control, love to give you a chance to join that conversation. Let's head out to New Mexico this time. KTGW. Chuck, thank you for calling.
Good afternoon. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure. What would you like to add to the conversation today?
Well, just before you went to break, you answered part of my question.
Oh, sure.
It was, I'd like an example of some civilian taking out a shooter, in a public place, and apparently it hasn't happened.
Oh, okay. Well, I could give you a couple examples. Had a shooter come in, and that woman who actually was armed was able to drop him before all sorts of people were killed. Fits into that example probably as best as anyone in terms of a church situation. We've also had some conversations with a few other individuals that have actually talked about church safety on this program before, and so the church examples are there. Eventually, they were able to in that case in Colorado with the movie theater, it was when a armed guard finally did show up and was able to bring that individual down, and of course he's now standing trial. So you can use some of those examples, but John Lott in his books and in some of his articles have documented all sorts of cases. And if you read some of the gun magazines like Guns and Ammo and things like that, you will see that oftentimes they'll tell stories where just a grandma showing a weapon stops an individual from actually trying to rob them, come in and shoot people, because there is a deterrent factor when even showing the weapon can be a way to actually prevent something that could be horrific from actually taking place.
Okay. Well, and what happens to the people that do? You said somebody's on trial for that. What happens to those shooters? the people that take out the shooter?
Usually nothing. Usually those are no build, but there have been a few cases. I mean, individuals where they had concealed carry. Sometimes, yes, they have to go before a grand jury. Most of those are resolved, but there's a few of those cases that
wasn't that the Heller case at the Supreme Court,
Mm-hmm.
where it was someone in their home,
Mm-hmm.
and they weren't they the ones that were tried and ended
Yes,
up
they
being
were
exonerated?
Right. And so the Heller case that went to the Supreme Court in 2008 is a good example of that.
Okay. Okay, that answers my question. I appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you asking the question.
Because I think it's really wrong for them to take away our weapons. I think that's just, it's going to happen someday, I have a feeling, but I think we ought to stall it as long as we possibly can.
Well, I appreciate that. And I may not have quite answered your question right. One of the things that we might do is I have put together a fact sheet on guns and gun control that appeared in one of our Outlook magazines, so you can ask for that if you'd like.
That would be great.
We may just put together, well, Penna, you and I are always writing commentary, so
Yeah,
I think this
and
has
I'm
commentary
thinking,
written all over it.
You mentioned John Lott, and I've interviewed him a few times too, and he has a book, More Guns, Less Crime. He's got, in his books, is he like a sociologist or something? Is that what his training is? So he has the stats,
right,
and the data to show that the presence of guns deters crimes, and in all different areas of the culture and society, from your home to public places and things. So some of the stats are in there, and we need to pull them out.
By the way, John Lott used to be a professor with Barry Obama, who then was known as Barack Obama, because
at University of Chicago.
University of Chicago. And last time John Lott was on, I just said, "Well, how was your conversations with Barack Obama?" He said to me, "You're the gun guy." I walked away and never really talked to me again. So that's about
even
as
back
far,
then.
That's about how far that conversation went. And to his credit, John Lott, who's been at the University of Chicago, he's been at Johns Hopkins, he's been at Yale, and I can't even remember all the places, has made available the databases he uses to come to these conclusions to anybody else, saying, if I've made a mistake or I've not done proper statistical analysis, it's kind of like, come and look at what I've done and see if you... The article that I'm quoting from is one that's been published in academic journals. Of course, he's got a number of books. People use in terms of some of that research. Let's head out to California, KYCC. Chris, you have the floor.
Hi, how you guys doing today?
Good. What's on your mind?
Well, I'm thinking about gun control. The liberals, their agenda is pretty hypocritical. They have, they push for abortion, 1.2 million babies a year, but yet they're more concerned about guns that kills maybe 11 to 12,000 a year. Some might be justified. Everything they do is backwards. Another point to ponder about, their agenda to confiscate guns, not to be a conspiracy theorist, but if you look back at Sandy Hook, something to think about. That little pipsqueak, there was the shooter. Not one person was injured. They were all shot dead. Not one person was taken to the hospital, and I find that really, really strange. I want to know your thoughts on that.
Well, again, maybe because he was using an AR-15, and you don't have to be quite so accurate.
Yeah, and they were little kids.
Yeah, a lot of little kids, and don't want to get into all the details, but the trauma that comes, even though the bullet 223 or 5.56 that's used in an AR-15, even though it's relatively small, because it's going at such a speed, supersonic, it creates more of a trauma in the body. So you can kill people much easier, and I don't mean to be gross about this, with a rifle oftentimes than you can with a handgun. And so the fact that he's shooting little kids and he's creating such trauma, I think that's the quick answer to it, but maybe there's something else there, and if we find something out, we'll let you know. Let me take at least one last phone call here before we change topics, most likely, and that is in Texas, KCTA. Richard, you have the floor.
Yes, sir. Thank you for taking my call. I just recently applied for my gun license, and I just want to make something clear here before we start pointing fingers and some others venturing out to say that guns are evil. I want to venture out to say that guns are not evil. It just depends who has a gun and what mindset they're in. That makes, unfortunately, in society, we point fingers at the issue, which a lot of people say is that it's the gun.
Guns don't shoot themselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
And if you've gone through a concealed handgun license course, you probably know a lot more about how to handle a weapon, to handle efficiency. You understand what, when and only when you could ever use lethal force. I would say that individuals that have their CHL are probably the most responsible individuals because they've been through training that other people have never been through.
Well, actually, that's correct. I've been around those type of situations because my dad had a lot of rifles. Well, back then, everything seemed to be okay. You didn't need a license anyways. But I'm responsible. I do also want to venture out to say, in my case, it's more exciting to me that I would have a license to carry one than actually carry one. But I just kind of wanted to clarify that nothing wrong with carrying pistols because, as we know, police officers have one, and, of course, they can be very handy when they need them. But, of course, anything falls in the hands of the wrong person, they can be used against anybody out there.
Sure.
So that was just my comment. Nothing wrong with pistols. I've seen some very nice pistols that have been sitting there for years and never killed anybody. So I just think we should address this more to the person who might be in charge of that hand weapon or that handgun or who might have a license for that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it does make a good point, though. If you have guns, your responsibility is to keep those guns secure. I mean,
right.
I always have thought as a mom, if you have guns in your home, you definitely have to keep those in a place where your kids, and especially when you're curious, kids get older and a little more curious, you've got to make sure, you've got the rules down and you've got the security down against that. And it's a responsibility that you carry for having this.
Keep your guns in one place, keep your ammo in another. That's another safe place. Have a gun safe, have a gun vault. Those are all things. Let's just end this section, and of course we're going to move on to some other topics later on. Thomas Sowell wrote recently, and I'm just quoting from him directly, the rate of gun ownership is higher in rural areas than in urban areas, but the murder rate is higher in urban areas. The rate of gun ownership is higher among whites than among blacks, but the murder rate is higher among blacks. Then he even points out that gun ownership has been 3 times as high in Switzerland as it is in Germany, but the Swiss have lower murder rates. He therefore concludes, guns are not the problem. People are the problem. And I think that's the point you were making just a minute ago, Richard. So let's take a break. If we are able to make connection, we will be talking with Representative Louie Gohmert, and I'm sure he has a few things to say about lots of issues. One of those, of course, is the speaker's race, and we wanted to get his thoughts about that. He might have some comments also about Russia now in Syria and what that might mean, and certainly we might even get a comment or two from him about gun ownership, gun control, and gun violence. So if we can connect up with him, that's what we will do. If not, we have some more opportunities for you to ask some questions or make some comments. 1-800-351-1212. I'm being somewhat careful because, as I've said many times before, members of Congress don't always control their lives. So we'll see if we can connect up with him, and we will do so right after these important messages.
This is an on-the-go world, and now wherever you go, Point of View goes with you. Visit the Apple or Google Play Store and download the free Point of View app. You can listen and watch the program live or play it again later. Get Kerby's Viewpoints commentary and click the Take Action link to make a difference in the world. You can also read articles, find a local radio station, and easily contact us with your comments or questions. Again, visit the Apple or Google Play Store today and get the app, the Point of View radio app. And one more thing, if you like it, click that button that says Donate Now and join the team. Point of View and the Point of View app, with you on the go.
At 17,000 feet on Mount Ararat in eastern Turkey.
We see it in every culture. The flood was a common story told, and there was an ark that saved humankind.
Lies a mystery that could change the way we look at the world.
Let's go find an ark.
Presented as a Fathom event, Finding Noah, an adventure of faith.
We knew we were on the brink of what could be the greatest archaeological discovery so far.
Witness the journey. Finding Noah. One night only, October 8th in theaters nationwide. FindingNoah.com.
Point of View will continue after this.
You're listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station.
And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Weekend edition, Penna Dexter with me, and we are now joined by our good friend Representative Louie Gohmert, who represents the 1st District in the state of Texas. Individual that you not only hear on this program, but oftentimes is a guest host for Sean Hannity on all sorts of different radio programs. And Penna, I'm looking forward to this interview, aren't you?
Well, me too, Louie. It's good to have you. My whole family, except for me, was at, or a lot of people that I know were at the Values Voters Summit last week. They said you gave a great speech.
Oh, well, thank you. It's good to talk to you guys again. It's been a little too long.
Yeah, it has, and a lot's happened in Congress.
Now, you run for Speaker of the House, so I wanted you to talk about the Speaker's race. You know, I remember when you were kind of forced into it against your will to run for Speaker of the House, and I heard you on another talk show recently talking about who is running and some of the people. So give us an understanding of how you pick a Speaker of the House and who's running this time and how we should be praying about that.
Yeah, it's a different race than anything, different election than anything I'd ever experienced before. But you're right. Back in January, we'd been trying for a few weeks ever since the Speaker Boehner had held Homeland Security hostage and basically funded everything else. I knew that he wasn't serious about defunding the president's illegal amnesty. And that's when some of us started looking at trying to come up with 29 votes on the floor to keep him from being Speaker. And we only had 9 for a few weeks there, and that's when Thomas Massey and Jim Blattenstein had called on Friday night before the vote on Tuesday and said, Louie, you need to announce. And I said, if I do that, you'll have Democrat, Republican establishments coming after me, talking about this crazy guy from Texas, and the race will lose its focus. Right now, we can talk about the Speaker's failed leadership. 61% of Americans of Republicans in January wanted a different Speaker. So they said, you've got to announce, because we've got so many guys that are telling Boehner, I'm all with you 100%. And by the way, I need this committee and I want to be this chairman. And then they're telling their constituents to say, don't vote for Boehner. Well, I wouldn't. I would vote for anybody else if somebody else would announce, but nobody's announcing, so I have to vote for Boehner. And so by my announcing, I knew that it would mean I could never get elected to anything in the House because I would make so many of my friends angry with me. And I can tell you, Kerby, they're still mad at me. Some of them are still mad at me. Most of them are back talking to me again. That's a good thing. But anyway, there are still people calling saying, if you had just voted for January, we wouldn't be in this mess. And then some of them get mad at me all over again. If you just shut up, we wouldn't have this problem. No, we were going to have this problem whether I was talking or not. The only question was, were we going to do something about it? And so, I've been pushing for 3 years to get new leadership, and it's now come to fruition. But this race, like I said, it's different from anything you've ever experienced. Normally, whether it's elections in school or in the community, people get elected for one thing, sometimes just because they're the best person for the job. That's a great thing when that happens. And often they get elected because they're the most popular person, sometimes because their name is more recognizable. And the thing about Congress, though, we don't elect the person who is most capable or most popular. We elect the person who a majority think is going to win, because a majority always votes for the person they think is going to win. Some of us are hard-headed, and we still vote for the person we think's best. That's kind of a novel concept, but a majority will always, both in the Republican and Democratic Party, House and Senate, they vote for who they think is going to win, because even though it's a secret ballot, if you don't tell the sitting speaker in advance that you're supporting him, then he knows you're not supporting him.
And then he won't appoint you to a committee or to chair a committee or whatever.
And And people don't want to be on the wrong side of the speaker unless you're hard-headed like me and you just want what's best for the country. But
what
normally,
a concept.
Yeah. Well, but when you rationalize, and by the way, anybody that's not good at rationalizing, go to law school. They will train you to you can rationalize anything. But the rationalization is, well, okay, maybe Boehner's not the best speaker in the world, but I would be the best chairman of that committee. And if I'm chairman of that committee, I can do so much more good for America. And so it actually ends up being a net gain by my voting. I mean, that's the way you rationalize.
Well, Louie,
but now we have a chance to have a new speaker, and it's interesting to see. I understand Jason Chaffetz may be announcing this afternoon.
Interesting. Well, because, everyone has said, and it's been kind of all over the news, that the anointed one would be Kevin McCarthy of California. And as a person who has gone out and recruited candidates and things, he's been working this. He's popular. He's a nice guy and all of that. Mm-hmm. And, I see the Wall Street Journal Republicans. I see the so-called conservatives that write columns in the Washington Post saying, listen, the conservatives just need to, if they're not going to put up one of their own, then they need to just support McCarthy and then be friends with him and get their, their things passed. What do you think of comments like that?
Well, I think we need somebody that will decentralize the power of speaker, and that's why I'm supporting Dan. Track record when he was the first Republican Speaker of the House in Florida, he decentralized the power of the Speaker, and that is something that just doesn't happen normally unless somebody is forced into it. It happened to Speaker Joe Cannon back in 1910. It happened again in 1922, I believe it was 22, when the power had been decentralized from a congressman named Norris that fought against Joe Cannon, got it decentralized. 12 years later, it's back all to the Speaker, so they had 9 ballots trying to get to a majority. And then finally the Speaker agreed to decentralize the power.
What does that mean, decentralizing the power of the Speaker?
Well, like right now, and with due notice, hat tip to the person on the floor that just really chewed me up on earlier this week because I was told, you lied on Fox News. You said Boehner was a dictator on Fox News Saturday morning. And I said, look, you got so close to the fire, you don't realize how much you've been scorched. But anyway, I'm so ashamed of you, was what I was told. Well, I'm not ashamed of standing up and calling it like it is. And what we have had is the Speaker has multiple votes on the steering committee, but then you've got a number of people on the steering committee. They want certain committees and certain chairmanships, so they don't want to make the Speaker mad. And so basically, the Speaker always gets what he wants on the steering committee, which technically the steering committee selects people for the committees, and then they select the chair for the committee. But nobody gets on a committee if Boehner doesn't want them on there. Nobody got to be a committee chair unless Boehner wanted them on there. And then when it comes to committees, you don't get to have a hearing unless it's okay with Boehner. You don't get to vote a bill out of your committee unless it's okay with Boehner. If you decentralize the power, then what you would have is the committees themselves select their own chairman. The committees themselves would decide what bills they would bring through committee and take to the floor. And the Speaker would not have this chokehold on everything. You make him mad, your bill doesn't come to the floor. And that's why when I have, as Art Laffer told me, Louie, you're a big idea guy. And I was talking to him yesterday, and I would submit Arthur Laffer as a big idea guy, Reagan's economic advisor. But we collaborated on some big ideas together. But big ideas don't go anywhere unless you get the speaker to embrace it, and he may not embrace it just even though it's a great idea, just as soon as it is.
Let me jump in. We have to have one of those mandatory breaks. You're a talk show host, so you know about those mandatory breaks. We'll take a break, and just giving you a little bit of the inside and back story of the speaker race. And some of you have been very frustrated that we elect these people to Congress. And, of course, we've seen that some then don't necessarily represent their constituents, but others that try to. But sometimes the Speaker of the House prevents that from happening. And that's why we think this is a very important race. And that's why I wanted to hear from a man that ran against the Speaker before and is supporting a different person this time. Let's take a break. We'll come back with more right after this.
America has the chance to stop funding one of the major perpetrators of an ongoing humanitarian crisis. But we're kicking the can down the road to December. The disturbing videos released by the Center for Medical Progress, which highlight Planned Parenthood's abortion activity and their side business selling baby parts, should have made defunding Planned Parenthood immediately a no-brainer. Horrified members of Congress went ahead and passed a bill to fund the government, including money for Planned Parenthood. There's this false choice that's dangled before politicians. Fund Planned Parenthood or be blamed for a so-called government shutdown. The president, of course, would veto any defunding measure. He went so far as to announce in fundraising emails that he'd rather let food stamp recipients go without than allow Planned Parenthood to be defunded. 45 million Americans participate in the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP. The SNAP program didn't miss a beat during the 16-day partial government shutdown of October 2013. But apparently there are currently no contingency funds for this. One pro-abortion congressman, Jeff Merkley of Oregon, disingenuously applied the Pope's humanitarian concerns to the situation, saying, "On a week when the Pope is making an historic visit to Washington to remind us all of our moral obligation to care for the poorest and most vulnerable among us, it is shameful that we are even contemplating a politically driven shutdown that would take food off the tables of millions of children, seniors, and disabled Americans." We must ask, who is more vulnerable than an unborn child? And Representative Merkley completely leaves out the fact that the Pope is pro-life. At the United Nations, Pope Francis condemned, quote, the marketing of human organs and tissues. Wonder if he saw the videos. This stunning loyalty to Planned Parenthood is partially explained by the organization's endorsement of President Obama and their tremendous help electing him. Plus, in 2010, Planned Parenthood Federation of America, along with a California affiliate, spent more than $700,000 on federal lobbying efforts. Planned Parenthood and its advocates in Congress insist that withholding federal funds means that poor women would be denied contraception, mammograms, and other basic health services. But Congress already spends billions every year through Medicaid, Medicare, and Title X for all kinds of medical services. As for mammograms, a new study proves Planned Parenthood doesn't do them. Defunding the left is just as crucial to the country's future as cutting spending. Planned Parenthood is their sacred cow because it helps facilitate their vision of amoral sexuality. Congress must defund Planned Parenthood. We now know Planned Parenthood sells body parts, the products of the abortions they perform, and that they risk harming women by altering procedures to get intact parts. To show our disgust, defunding Planned Parenthood is the very least we can do. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Time for a few more minutes with us, and Penna Dexter in studio and Louie Gohmert by phone. And Penna, I know you had a comment or question for Louie.
Well, you know, some people are trying to crown a certain speaker right now, Kevin McCarthy, and then he kind of made a blunder. And this was with Sean Hannity on Tuesday of this week when he was asked what the GOP has accomplished. And his answer, it might have been like, well, some people called it a rookie mistake, but he's been the majority leader. He says, everybody thought Hillary Clinton was unbeatable, right? But we put together a Benghazi special committee, a select committee. What are her numbers today? Her numbers are dropping. Why? Because she's untrustable. But no one would have known any of that had happened had we not fought and made that happen. Of course, then he was blasted by the Democrats And certain conservatives are saying that was done because now you all of a sudden opened this up to being politicized. There's a legitimate reasons for this hearing, and they're not political, all of that. So did he hurt himself?
Well, that was not the most articulate statement, because you guys know we still need to get to the bottom of Benghazi. That was not simply a political committee. In fact, many of us, we made clear we don't care what's at the bottom, whether Republicans approved of it or not. We want to know what happened. It's the only way you prevent that happening again.
Well, this is where we found out about the emails, and so I don't know that he was trying to say that, but he certainly made it sound like it.
But the truth is that the select committee really hasn't discovered significant emails. Those have come from Judicial Watch. There were FOIA requests, there are lawsuits they filed, and they have gotten a judge to repeatedly force the State Department to disclose emails. And that's really where the main emails have come from, because Boehner really has kind of kept been obstructionist, letting the committee go forward, do what they needed to. But on this issue of the speaker, I'll tell you a good example. You're talking about the speaker's power. We have got to redo the rules of governance in the House. Most of them were put in place after Watergate, most liberal Congress until Pelosi took the gavel, and they put all these things in place. Like, we have so much duplication and waste in our government, and a good example was one that Dan Webster himself found, because he was a big fan of transportation like all of us are, but he really digs deep, did when he was in Florida. So he made it his personal mission to find out how many agencies, how many offices, different groups does the federal government fund who has the obligation of getting people to and from appointments. Well, he says he's pretty sure he's found them all, because they're just covered up in a whole bunch of different departments, agencies, whatnot. He says he's pretty sure that there's only 85. And most of
85.
85. Most of them have 20-seat white vans that sit dormant or carry 3 people on average when they go anywhere. And one of the problems we've had, the way the Democrats set the rules up, if you try to say, wait a minute, let's cut a couple of these out. Well, they're in different budgets. So when you go after one of these agencies that gets somebody to and from of an appointment, they say, oh, you hate children or women or veterans or seniors. And if we could bring all of those together in one public assistance committee, one budget for all welfare, all public assistance, then we would be able to say, no, we don't hate anybody, but we don't need to pay for 85 different groups to get people to and from. We could look at all the money we could save, and we can use that to help people more than just wasting on vans sitting in a parking lot. So that's the kind of thing we need to do, and I'm very concerned that we're going to proceed business as usual unless we have somebody from outside the current chain of command. And, Dan's that kind of guy. That's what he did in Florida.
Well, again, I appreciate you giving us some overview of what is happening in the speaker's race. And I think just before I run out of time, and we're getting close to the top of the hour, it just seems to me that this is an important race. People should be praying about it and contacting their member of Congress in the House of Representatives and finding out who they actually support.
And Kerby, to that point, if people hadn't burned up the phone lines in January and continued emailing and burning up the phone lines, John Boehner would be the speaker for the next year and a half. So it does make a difference. This is incredibly historic to have a speaker step down like this at a point like this. And people are making a difference because they're paying attention. And thank you, Penna and Kerby, for what you're doing. And thanks for the soapbox you've allowed me to have. You guys are just so wonderful.
Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, we'd love to see you in studio next time if we can make that work out.
I look forward to it.
Well, Louie Gohmert, again, representing the 1st District in Texas. And just before we run out of time, of course, we haven't talked much about what has been happening in Russia there, but a real concern that Russia right now intervening in Syria. We'll probably get a chance to talk about that next week. And this is something that caught, obviously, the members of the White House and the strategic areas really off guard. And I even posted an article today, America in Disarray. Charles Kruttheimer has a piece, Obama's Syria debacle. So there will be a lot more we'll probably talk about in the future. But again, that's just one more issue that we've put on the table today, in addition to Planned Parenthood, the shooting in Oregon, the speaker's race, and of course what's happening in Syria.
It's a real concern. It seems like Putin is really filling the void that Obama has left with his Middle East policy. And, we have played, I think the Iran deal was really the straw that broke the camel's back and caused him to be emboldened. Now he's in there fighting against the groups that we have been fighting for, opposing Assad. He's trying to build up Assad and saying he's helping defeat ISIS, but he's not really going against ISIS. Maybe he will in the future. We'll have some experts on that issue as we watch it.
I know that next week. I apologize to those of you on the line because we did want to give some time to Louie Gohmert today. So if you didn't get through today, the bottom line is you can get through perhaps next week. Let me mention a couple of things real quickly. Of course, we have talked about Planned Parenthood today. We have Penna Dexter's commentary on funding Planned Parenthood. I would encourage you to read that and maybe pass it on to others. And those of you that have not signed up to receive our commentaries, we do send them out every single day. And so that's an opportunity for you to read them or to listen to them. And so take the time to sign up on our Viewpoint section. Our Take Action section on the fight to defund Planned Parenthood, that's an ongoing battle, and that will be for some time. We did mention, and I know Bob just a few minutes ago mentioned the Point of View app. I use that because even next week I'll be out and I'll have a chance to listen to Penna Dexter even though I'm in another part of the country. I just pull up my phone and I can listen. I can even see what's going on. It's just amazing. So, of course, you can watch us on your computer or listen to us on your computer, but you can also watch or listen to us on the app and download the commentaries and get lots of great material. So that's available. Don't forget that next May we are having our journey to Jerusalem. We are going both to Israel and to Greece. It is the least expensive trip we've ever been able to put together for Israel. You can go to either or both. And so please take advantage of that. I know there are many of you that have always wanted to go to the Holy Land. Say, I just cannot afford it. This is the least expensive trip I think I've ever seen. And yet we still stay in very nice places, so I hope that you'll take the time to visit the website, find out a little bit more about all of these issues. Hope you have a great weekend, and there are certainly going to be a lot to cover next week, so please visit the website, pointofview.net, on a regular basis to find some of the information that you need. I want to thank Andrew and Catherine and Chris for the help behind the scenes. Thank those of you that have supported this ministry. We'll give you a final total on that next week. Have a great weekend. See you back on Monday.
This is an on-the-go world, and now wherever you go, Point of View goes with you. Visit the Apple or Google Play Store and download the free Point of View app. You can listen and watch the program live or play it again later. Get Kerby's Viewpoints commentary and click the Take Action link to make a difference in the world. You can also read articles or questions. Again, visit the Apple or Google Play Store today and get the app, the Point of View radio app. And one more thing, if you like it, click that button that says Donate. Point of View and the Point of View app, with you on the go.
A mystery that could change the way we look at the world.
Let's go find an ark.
Presented as a Fathom event, Finding Noah, an adventure of faith.
We knew we were on the brink of what could be the greatest archaeological discovery so far.
Witness the journey. Finding Noah. One night only, October 8th in theaters nationwide. FindingNoah.com.
Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.